Guild members, my name is Becky Caputo, and Deline had asked if I would record a video for the next guild meeting, and I said, sure, but I didn't know what to record, so I thought about it, and since I'm a teacher, one of the easiest ways that we collaborate as teachers is we do what are called learning walks, and we walk through and get to visit each other's classrooms and watch each other teach and then get ideas from just how classrooms are set up and how teachers have things organized. And so I thought what I would do is I would take you on a learning walk around my sewing space. And some of the ideas I've gotten in organizing my space from Pinterest, some from magazines, some I've just made up. And all of it is based around the space that I have and kind of the stage of life I'm in. I'm currently a mom. I have 3 children. I have a 13-year-old son, a daughter who will be 12 on May 22nd, and a son who is 10. So when they were little, I had all of my sewing things and machines tucked away inside a cabinet with doors. And now that they're older and they don't mess with my things as much, I'm able to have my space kind of out and available, and I keep taking over more and more of what we call either our family room or our playroom. So if you hear me refer to that room, it's the same room in our house, and I just keep taking over a little bit more every few months when I rearrange things. So this is my sewing room learning walk for you. I hope you enjoy it. Maybe you get some ideas. Here you go. I'm going to give you a quick tour or layout of the space. So right there is the door that goes into our kitchen and the rest of our house. I share my sewing space with our 5 pet rats. I also share my sewing space with my teacher desk. You can see that right here with my document camera so that I can teach my students in live lessons during the day. There's our backyard. I have a great view of our backyard. Behind me you see my sewing table, which is somewhat of a disaster because I've been making masks and quilt blocks. And then my sewing space as you turn all the way to the closet that I've claimed half of so far. It's also halfway filled with board games for my kids. Before I show you more of my space, let me clean my sewing table really quick. I'll be right back. All right, one of the first things people notice when they walk into my sewing space is this pegboard wall behind me. I found this at Goodwill for $4, probably about 7 or 8 years ago. And it is by far one of my favorite things in my sewing space. It has all different sorts of scissors, and it has an extension cord on there. I keep my guild name tag up there. I've hot glued, if we get a little closer, I'm trying to keep it steady. I've hot glued some clothespins with ribbon on them. Here's an example. And this allows me for things that don't already have a hook. It allows me to hang them. You'll notice these are some instructions from Deline's charity quilts, and I keep just 1 or 2 of each instruction so that I can remember how to make them when I have extra fabric later, and then I can just tuck them on my board. I also have random things I just like on this board. Like this picture was given to me by a teacher a few years ago that I worked with just for 3 months, and I really liked it, so I hung it on my wall. I also hang earphones so I know where they are. Not all of these scissors work. Some of them are simply sentimental. I have tintypes, I don't know how to pronounce that, from my dad who passed away over 6 years ago. Many of these pinking shears are from my grandmother, who also passed away when I was a little girl. So it's just a fun reminder of them, and I keep them on my board even if I don't use them. Behind me, I have my work table. This is just a regular 12-foot dining room table that my dad found on Craigslist for me about 8 or 9 years ago. And it has drop leaves on both ends, and it has 2 leaves in the middle. So it's really convenient is that if I'm not in the middle of a project, I can pull everything off of it and we can use it as an extra dining room table space. Or I can make it really small if we need the floor space in our playroom. For now, I have it extended as far as it can go because we're home at quarantine and I'm doing a lot of sewing projects. Here's how it's set up. This is a quilt top I still need to put together. Next to it, you see a stack of quilts. Those are going to my classroom next year. Our schools got redone with polished concrete floors, which are fantastic to keep sanitized, and when things spill, then they aren't stained. However, they're really uncomfortable to sit on or to meet in small groups, and I find that a lot of my students get the wiggles if they have to sit in their chair all day. So I'm making some scrap quilts for them to use next year for reading and for meeting in small groups, and it makes the classroom a little more cozy. Next to it, I have a pile of fabric that I'm hoping to work with next. It's a whole bunch of shirting plaids that I'm going to put together to make charity quilts, probably for passages at Mount Hood Medical Center because they're in need of those right now. And then I have my shelf that I use. On the bottom are my bigger pieces of fabric, or right now, the pieces of fabric that I need ironed. I personally wash and then iron my fabrics before I put them in a quilt because a lot of my quilts are being used and then washed and dried as well. So I want to make sure there's none of that shrinkage and the seams are pulling. So I'll iron those at some point when our family is watching some shows at night. I'll pull out my ironing board to the living room. In the middle row, I keep blocks that are 10.5 inches, 8.5 inches, and 8 inches. And at the very top, I have differing stacks of 4, 4.5, 5, 6, and 7-inch blocks. And depending on if those stacks get too tall, then I know, time to make some charity scrap blocks, and I put them together into a quilt, and off they go. Up above is another just random spot where I can put things. I have 3-inch blocks in this tiny little wooden box right here. I have another sewing kit that I got a few years ago. I don't know when I'll get to it, but I will at some point. And then there's some extra blocks from quilts that are up and collecting in that wire basket, and eventually they will go together into a scrappy quilt, and probably again go to charity because I don't need to keep any more of the quilts I make. All right, behind me is my sewing counter. This is where I keep my machines. I have my serger and my sewing machine. It currently has a walking foot on it, so I mostly use my serger to piece quilts and then my machine to quilt them and bind and finish them off. I'll show you in a minute what are in the drawers that are underneath them. I know some quilters don't like having the serger seams on the back of their quilt blocks. When I'm doing the scrappy blocks, that tends to work best for me because I need those extra edges cut off of the back. I don't want that bulk of fabric there, which is why I learned how to just simply machine quilt my own quilts so that I don't frustrate long armers with those extra threaded seams that a serger creates. So for me, that works wonderfully for the type of quilts that I make most. Above my sewing counter, I have my threads arranged, and you can see them arranged in cool colors and in warm colors and neutral colors. Above them are the cones for my serger. Those aren't super arranged yet, but I'll probably arrange them at some point so they match the cold, warm, and neutral colors. And above is an old quilt that I was given and restored, about 5 of the blocks, and I rotate it around so it doesn't get too faded. And underneath it, it is hanging on my wooden quilt frame that I was given by my parents and my in-laws when I graduated college. I don't have room to set up my quilt frame right now, but it will hold a queen-size quilt for hand quilting, and eventually I'll get it down again and set it up. It's a really nice one that folds up against the wall, and my dad helped put hangers so that I can hang different quilts. At Christmas time, I take this quilt down and put up a Christmas quilt, so it's like I have Christmas decorations in my sewing space. Because I have a small space, I hang my ironing board and iron on my laundry room door. Next to it is my cabinet where I get the top half, and you see these are my bigger bolts of fabric. Below is where my kids keep board games and things. Next on my counter is my dad's old fishing box, and I use this fishing box to keep all sorts of sewing notions. When I go on vacation, this box goes with me and has all those extra tiny pieces you need when sewing. I have a drawer of just Christmas fabrics so that I can keep those separate, followed by my 3 drawers of fat quarters. They are separated by the warm colors, followed by my cool colors. Again, these are all fat quarter-ish type. And then the bottom drawer are my neutral colors. And you can even see there's a bag of fabrics that go together in a Ziploc. My middle drawers start with a drawer of random notions. Everyone needs to have one of those in their sewing space. And then these are my tiny scraps. These are scraps that are about 1.5 inches square or bigger. They are that warm drawer, followed by the cold colored drawer, and then down below, you guessed it, my neutral colored drawer. So when I do scrappy quilts, I try to pull from all 3 drawers to get a balance. The last set has my bias tape and notions drawer. This used to look better until I started making masks with bias tape. Underneath that is my waterproof fabric and Velcro. So when I make snack bags, this is where I keep all of that material separate. And then I have 2 drawers that kind of have random projects or things my daughter is working on. She was working on a quilt with this green and frog fabric. And then on the side, this is my hand quilting patterns and a fun yardstick that I bought years ago. Underneath my sewing table is where I keep boxes of projects. This is where I keep the flannel and cotton for things I'm going to work on later. And there you have it. That's my sewing space, and that's your learning walk through my family room area. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you gained some tips and tricks, and maybe you can share some of your ideas and organizational tips with the rest of us as well. And I hopefully will see you soon when we can meet again in person. Bye.